Thank you so much for clicking on my video. And if you're returning, welcome back to my channel. Tonight, we are now concluding the recap of Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words by Andrew Morton. And I am actually recapping the 25th anniversary edition. I feel like this entire experience of recapping this book has made me feel like I have a greater understanding of Princess Diana, but mostly Diana Spencer. And I think it's important to differentiate the two because I think it's such a shame for someone who stood for so many amazing things and stood up for so many people around the world. Her entire story has mostly been co opted by her cheating husband and his deceitful whore. And that makes me sad for her. And so, in this recap, I have truly made an asserted effort to talk about Diana's work, her passions, her interests, but most of all, her and her life, a life that was unfortunately cut far too short. So, as we continue our recap, let's move forward in recapping the end of this book with as much positivity and love and compassion as possible. But that does not mean you are restricted from reading Charles's ass down. As a matter of fact, I encourage it. So let's get started. Thank you so much for watching a video here on the SharionSade channel. We are here for a great time and good vibes only. While I'll always operate with efficiency and accuracy to the best of my ability, this is YouTube and not CNN nor the BBC. Please adjust any expectations accordingly. In addition, due to the nature of my content,
many people expect me to speak in a British accent. Words like privacy, charade, and can't are expected to sound British.
However, I am American. My accent is American and I do speak in an American accent, not British. If this is an issue for you, I truly encourage you to find content that aligns with your interests. And for the rest of us, let's get ready to have a great time. Once again, thank you so much for clicking on my video. If you haven't already, feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. And I want to say a big thank you so much to everyone who supports the channel through memberships, as well as a membership on my Patreon. Thank you for everything. So now we are recapping the aftermath. Now I have the 25th anniversary edition of Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words. And so this actually recaps the part of her life that happened after the book published. And so obviously this wouldn't have been able to be in the original book. So that is why we have this amazing segment. And so that is what part 3 will consist of, is everything that occurred after the book was published up until her passing. And there's also a portion of it that leads up to 2017 from the moment when Harry publicly began dating Meghan. So I thought that was really interesting, and I'm hoping that he will continue, or the publishers will continue to let this book evolve in this manner. I think it's great. So, Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words by Andrew Morton was published, and the media grasped onto the suicide attempts, Charles's uncaring nature, and Diana's bulimia nervosa. The royal family and their circle iced Diana out even more. It was really hard for her, although it was somewhat expected, but I don't know that she expected it to the extent that it occurred, with Prince Philip taking it particularly hard.
A whispering campaign against the princess now began in earnest as the royal family closed ranks against her. Meanwhile, a climate of paranoia prevailed within the royal family itself. Bitter accusations, witch-hunting inquests, and acrimonious investigations. At Kensington Palace, she had the room swept for listening devices and destroyed every scrap of paper she wrote on, knowing that there were those who would secretly rummage through the wastepaper baskets for anything that might be used against her. As the summer dragged on, Prince Charles's allies began to rally round in earnest. Friends who a dozen years earlier had warned him against marrying Diana now questioned her mental stability, advising him to dump her immediately.
In light of the book coming out, Prince Charles's circle comes out in full defense of him. Now, the book claims that Charles explicitly asked them not to and did not participate in the media tabloid campaign against Princess Diana. However, in light of recent events, I have reasons to cast doubt on that, but we will continue recapping the book as it is and not Sharion's thoughts. But I'll give you a little on the side. Now, his entire clique, particularly the Hive Grove set, come out and start publishing awful stories about Diana and positive stories about Charles, stating he's a great father. He worked very hard to get Diana to be a good wife. He was very patient, kind with her. But due to her many, many mental illnesses, it was difficult for him to be a good husband to her. And that's just some of the fodder. Of course, this was devastating to Princess Diana. However, she continued to do engagements, and the public showed her an amazing amount of sympathy and support. And believe it or not, this actually surprised her.
The princess flew by helicopter to Merseyside for a visit to a hospice, her first official engagement since Diana, Her True Story hit the headlines. It proved to be an emotional meeting between Diana and her public. She was so touched by the show of affection from waiting well-wishers that she burst into tears, overcome by the distressing echoes of her morning meeting with palace officials and by the underlying strain of the decision she and Prince Charles had taken.
At this point, Princess Diana is keenly aware that everything she does is going to be perceived as a message to Charles or the firm. And she takes that very seriously, not wanting to exacerbate any of the fallout that she's already experiencing. And the walls are actually closing in on her. When she's invited to the premiere of What's Love Got to Do with It, the story depicting Tina Turner's life, namely her marriage to Ike Turner, that was extremely volatile, she opted not to go despite wanting to because she didn't want anyone to perceive that as a message to or about Prince Charles. Sometime later, Princess Diana is dealt another blow when two of her private phone calls with friend and suspected lover, James Gilby, are made public.
He called her darling 53 times and squidgy or squidge 14 times. Inevitably, the scandal came to be known as Squidgygate. During the racy, if rambling and rather juvenile conversation, the princess was heard telling Gilby about her impossible life with Prince Charles and her isolation inside the royal family, which, she felt, was increasingly distancing itself from her. She spoke of her fear of becoming pregnant, though this part of the tape was not published until 5 months later, on the eve of her solo visit to Nepal. Her anxiety about a clandestine meeting with her admirer and her dreams for the future.
I find it to be peculiar that the initial tape is released and then 5 months pass before more of the tape is released. And it just so happens to be on the eve of a very large solo engagement. I smell palace leaks. Diana is, of course, humiliated and very embarrassed twice. James Gilby becomes public enemy number one, and this forces the Queen to call a meeting with the Waleses, Philip, and herself. It's surprising to Diana that the Queen is actually sympathetic to her in her embarrassment.
She did, however, find one, perhaps rather unlikely ally at the palace, in the Queen, whose understanding and helpful attitude did much to encourage Diana to soldier on. Even so, the princess had few illusions about the royal family, its courtiers and supporters. As one of her closest friends remarked, even if they've not managed to kill the golden goose that laid the golden eggs for the media, they have certainly succeeded in wounding her.
Queen Elizabeth II showed great sympathy to Diana for Squidgygate, and coming on the heels of Fergie's toe-sucking gate, the Queen was eager for a definitive resolution between Charles and Diana, and she was, quite frankly, over the scandals. She recommended an informal separation where Charles and Diana would live separately but only appear on formal engagements together. And that sounds eerily similar to the setup that we see displayed in front of us with another royal couple who are still within the fold, bearing the same name. Charles offered to move out of Kensington Palace, and Diana accepted this, and for a time, this was the established plan. Princess Diana was very nervous that if she didn't work within the ranks of the royal family, that she would lose her sons, recalling her own upbringing in a separated household. She wanted to separate her office staff from Charles, who pushed against it, which I don't find to be a coincidence since she felt he was competing with her. Diana was so frustrated at this that she threatened to take both William and Harry to Australia, but was immediately reminded that she had the heirs to the throne, and there were legalities associated with their place in the line of succession, making this anything other than your standard custody battle. At the Queen's request, Diana and Charles now negotiated a separation, continued to appear on formal engagements together, and play nice. However, on one trip dubbed the second honeymoon, Diana was reminded yet again that she wasn't welcome in her own marriage.
With open warfare declared between the Waleses, Buckingham Palace in turmoil, and separation discussions underway, the grotesque charade of normality was still maintained. A summer cruise, foolishly billed as a second honeymoon for the prince and princess, was announced. For Diana, it was the holiday from hell. She had too many painful memories of previous holidays on board the Alexander, one of 11 luxury yachts owned by the Greek billionaire John Latsis, having little contact with her husband, sleeping in a separate cabin, and preferring to take her meals with the children. The underlying tension was not helped when she picked up a ship-to-shore telephone and overheard her husband speaking to Camilla Parker Bowles. She was not surprised, though her misgivings about the relationship had been derided as the fantasies of a sick woman. "Why don't you go off with your lady and have an end to it?" she asked Prince Charles wearily.
On a trip to India, Princess Diana posed in front of the Taj Mahal alone, while Charles was in a business meeting. On several other occasions, when Charles tried to kiss Diana, she turned away, exposing Charles's calculated attempts to dispel her claims of an uncaring husband. This was all about his PR. Speculation began about Diana's relationship with the Queen and Prince Philip, so Diana had to release a statement. Although some years later, correspondence appeared allegedly from Prince Philip to Princess Diana, where he reportedly insulted her. However, he later commented that his correspondence with his daughter-in-law was a private matter. The separation negotiations finally come to a close. Diana decorated her apartment in Kensington Palace, and visitors noted how amazing the atmosphere had changed now that Charles was gone, for good anyway. She painted, changed the furniture, and had a new private telephone number, all marking the new beginning. The staff was even happier, and the energy was far more relaxed. Guests were greeted with loud music, white Casablanca lilies, and a carefree mood. Princess Diana reserved her humorous side for her bathroom, wallpapering it with newspaper clippings of animated depictions of Prince Charles talking to his plants. Charles was also keen to his new beginning, hiring a designer to redecorate Highgrove and wipe clean any symbol of Princess Diana. He also redecorated his new home at St. James's Palace. Despite the new vibes, Kensington was still difficult for Diana because of the intrusive bodyguards and surveillance, and it served as a constant reminder of her difficult time with Prince Charles. So when her brother Charles offered her a 4-bedroom garden house at Althorpe, she jumped at the opportunity. However, 3 weeks later, he called back and he had changed his mind. The ramped up police presence that would ensue on the property, as well as the fact that Althorpe was open to the public, that alone would restrict Diana's freedom of movement and served as the reason for him reneging on his offer, and she was yet again devastated. Following the heartbreak of her brother reneging on the garden house, Diana decided to make amends and tie up loose ends. She was really ready to embrace this new beginning. She reached out to her maternal grandmother, Lady Fermoy, who she had shared a contentious relationship with for a few reasons. Lady Fermoy not only sided with her father against her mother during their divorce, but she also did the same with Prince Charles and Diana's separation. Princess Diana decided to put all of the grievances out to pasture after talking through them directly, as opposed to residing to pleasantries when she saw her grandmother. She then took the opportunity to invite Rain, her stepmother, to lunch with her new husband after the Earl Spencer had passed away. This brought more division within the Spencer household, but Diana emphasized the need to move on. She also spent more of her time post-separation reading in her garden, going on active engagements alone, and visiting her sons at school. This newfound energy had its stopping points. Christmases were spent alone. With the separation, Christmas Eve with the boys was spent at Sandringham, but Diana had to leave on Christmas Day for the royal family to spend time together. She looked forward to her kids spending quality time with her, but it wasn't as often as she'd liked. Both William and Harry found different outlets through sports and friendships. Something of note, though, it says that William preferred competition amongst his friends due to the repeated failure at beating his younger brother, more skilled at all things sport and outdoors. And I found that to be very funny because we now know that that is 100% true. And this little one sided competition from William has never ended.
As a sportsman, he was quite fearless, eager to run William into the ground. The older prince preferred to go riding or shooting with his friends, where he was not constantly frustrated by his inability to better his younger brother. He was, in any case, the more serious of the two. Harry, the more nimble and impish, both in sport and conversation.
And just when the royal family thought they were through with scandals, in comes Tampongate.
Now, however, it was Prince Charles's turn to rue the telephone's invention. Tabloid newspapers published the transcripts of a tape-recorded telephone conversation, allegedly, between the prince and Camilla Parker Bowles. Its content, which was both intimate and distasteful, forced many leading establishment figures traditionally loyal to the crown, notably members of the church, the military and parliament, to question Prince Charles's fitness to rule. After various words of endearment from the woman, the man says, "Your great achievement is to love me." The man makes a coarse joke about being turned into a tampon so that he might be constantly joined with his lover, who, if this were indeed Camilla Parker Bowles, was then the wife of one of his oldest friends. Just before he rings off, he says he will press the tit, meaning one of the buttons on the telephone. The woman replies, "I wish you were pressing mine."
Now, that's about all of that I can handle. That is actually pretty disgusting, made even more disgusting when you factor in what these two people actually look like. It's just rude. And whoever released that, while we can all appreciate it for the many jokes it has spawned over the years, I also do not appreciate putting that in my brain regarding Camilla and Charles. But I digress. Princess Diana took this scandal really hard, as it not only confirmed to the world that her observations had been correct, but also the entire network of family and friends that she'd come to know within the fold of her marriage were conspirators working together with the sole purpose of deceiving her. That had to be tough. She did put on a brave face, but deep down, she was said to have been in shambles. After this, though, Diana began operating in a less extravagant manner on royal trips and engagements. She felt like it was time to rebrand. This is all in line with her new start, with the separation complete. The negotiations are now done. She has her new lease on life, and she wants to scale back. Never having been one for extravagance anyway, it was kind of part of that atmosphere in the royal family that she could never connect with. She didn't like banquets. She didn't like the big to do. She didn't really care for any of the balcony stuff. She just was not a big person on extravagance. She preferred more to be more down to earth. She preferred to be more able to connect with people and have a more realistic approach. She even felt like the title princess or her royal highness or being called ma'am put a wall between her and other people. And so when it was eventually stripped away post divorce, she said it wasn't even that big of a deal to her simply because it made it easier for her to connect with people. It was during this time that Princess Diana also decided to forego engagements outside of London. After a trip to Zimbabwe, a photo was used of Diana doling out food to children, and she was furious. She was fiercely against the begging bowl image of Africa, which was both manipulative, patronizing, and regressive. She did not want her image used this way and wanted to put an end to that moving forward. So she decided to help from afar so as not to play into that media stereotype. Even during this period of time, with pulling back just a little bit on her engagements, she was still struggling with the press's exploitation of her. And this was evidenced by the Sunday Mirror running a full page photo of her working out at her health club in a leotard. The photos were actually taken by the gym manager, Bryce Taylor. He reportedly received a six-figure sum for the pictures, and Buckingham Palace MPs and Lord McGregor howled their fury at the Sunday Mirror for the flagrant invasion of privacy. Taylor wildly claimed that Diana wanted the pictures taken, and several members of the firm, politicians, and influential people implied that there was some truth to this claim. I always feel really bad for Diana because she was always the scapegoat. Lawyers acting on her behalf successfully sued the Sunday Mirror and the Daily Mirror for publishing pictures that were secretly taken of the princess exercising. How the case was settled? Mirror Group newspapers apologized, and the case was settled before even going to court. The newspaper is believed to have paid Princess Diana's $1 million in legal costs and donated about $200,000 to charity. With this and the fallout from it, Princess Diana announced her withdrawal from public life.
In the past 12 years, I can honestly say that one of my greatest pleasures has been my association with people like yourself. During those years, I've met many thousands of wonderful and extraordinary people, both here and around the world. I hope in some small way I have been of service in return. But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear.
So foreign tours in the new year have been cancelled and she'll cut drastically all public appearances.
My first priority will continue to be our children, William and Harry, who deserve as much love and care and attention as I am able to give, as well as an appreciation of the tradition into which they were born. I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years.
She acknowledged the support, kindness, affection, love and
today
care of the public at large.
And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Upon stepping back, Diana spent her time meeting with those in need in private. She planned to open hospices for end-of-life care all around the world. Her platform of mental health, domestic violence, and AIDS brought her so much scrutiny from royalists, but she persevered. She was also adamant about exposing her sons to the needs of the world, being very vocal about the extreme importance of exposing them to what the world truly is rather than allowing them to be shielded by their status and their privilege. And although these platforms brought her so much pushback, because of course, this isn't what princesses are usually talking about, she did not care. And while Diana felt like she was in limbo in her relationship with Charles, things hit a new level of intolerable when Jonathan Dimbleby's film debuted about Charles's life, in which Charles admitted to cheating on Diana and still doubled down on his plans to remain friends with Camilla.
The most damaging charge that is made in relation to your marriage is that you were, because of your relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, from the beginning, persistently unfaithful to your wife and thus caused the breakdown. What is your response to that?
Mrs. Parker Bowles is a great friend of mine. I have a large number of friends. I'm terribly lucky to have so many friends who I think are wonderful and make the whole difference to my life, which would become intolerable otherwise. And she has been a friend for a very long time, and along with a lot of other friends, and will continue to be a friend for a very long time. And I think also most people probably would realize that when marriages break down, awful and miserable as that is, that so often, you know, that it is your friends who are the most important and helpful and understanding and encouraging. Otherwise, you would go stark raving mad. And that's what friends are for.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down. Us both having tried.
You've been very open about all of this and what you've said. Do you now hope that this issue and expect this issue to go away? Is that what you hope will now happen?
Well, it would be awfully nice if it did, from everybody's point of view. I mean, I don't think many other people have to go through this constant attention, not just me, but others, you know, when they're...
Word salad. He admitted that he did cheat with Camilla Parker Bowles, but only when the marriage was irretrievably broken already. Which obviously that was a lie because they started the marriage cheating. So anywho, on the night of the premiere of the program, Princess Diana decided not to indulge in masochism and opted instead to go to a dinner at the Serpentine Gallery in Kensington Gardens. Her first response was concern for her children. And then the revenge dress.
The Prince of Wales has admitted publicly for the first time that he was unfaithful.
She decided that she was going to fight back, and she decided that she would choose a dress that she had previously rejected as being a little outre, a little too much, and she would put that on and go out on the town.
Princess Diana, who declined to take part in the program, was tonight attending a charity dinner while her husband spoke of their past and future to millions.
It was off the shoulder, strapless. It had little hints of sleeves on each side, but mainly it was diagonally ruched, and it revealed one leg higher than the other, and she wore it with kiss of black hose, which is always great for someone of her height because it continues the line down. And so it was a lot of see-through black, and there was a chiffon scarf as if she had wrapped it and tied it like that, and that flowed in the wind. So there was a provocative movement of chiffon and a very wrapping of her dress in a lovely way.
Suddenly, after having lost this little battle, Prince Charles began complaining about Diana's weekly grooming budget, only for those same complaints to end up in two separate tabloids. And by mere coincidence, I'm sure, the two tabloids that this information ended up in happened to be the two that had been the most hostile to Princess Diana. Sometime later, Diana gave an interview of her own to Martin Bashir of Panorama in secret. And it was roughly a year later. But this interview is what sealed the deal. In this interview, Princess Diana opened up completely and shocked the world, resulting in many seeing the British monarchy as an oppressive regime. In this interview, Diana spoke on many topics, including William and Harry, her eating disorder, and her husband's ability or inability to rule in the future.
Do you believe that a campaign was being waged against you?
Yes, I did, absolutely. Yeah.
Why?
I was a separated wife to the Prince of Wales. I was a problem, full stop. Never happened before. What do we do with her?
Can't we pack her off to somewhere quietly rather than campaign against her?
She won't go quietly. That's the problem. I'll fight till
4
the
weeks later, after consulting with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prime Minister, Queen Elizabeth II wrote personally to both the Prince and Princess of Wales, requesting that they file for divorce immediately. Princess Diana announced her decision to agree to a divorce, and she called this day the saddest day of her life. She then released a statement, but the Queen hit back at her statement with a counter, saying many of the items in Diana's statement were yet to be decided. After 4 months of negotiations, the divorce decree was issued. When Diana's title was stripped, there was much scrutiny placed upon the royals as being petty. Diana, however, chose to retain 5 charities: her leprosy mission, Centerport for the homeless, the National AIDS Trust, Royal Marsden NHS Trust, it's a cancer hospital, and the Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. After all of this, Princess Diana finally felt free. In 1997, Princess Diana held an auction of many pieces in her old wardrobe to benefit AIDS charities in New York City, a move that was seen as her final farewell to her old life as she embarked anew. Princess Diana's new lease on life and renewed purpose raged through her with electricity. She felt encouraged by Prime Minister Tony Blair, and by discussing her proposal for ambassadorship abroad, she felt she was finally carving out her space in humanitarianism. It was then that Diana decided to raise funds to aid in the campaign to rid the world of landmines. This was noted by her trip with the Red Cross in Angola. Although she understood the risk of being seen as too political, she valued the benefits for those suffering above all else. Now, we've talked a lot about Princess Diana's work and how she refocused during her separation, during her divorce, and suddenly thereafter. However, right after her divorce, Diana felt extremely romantically devoid at that time. One of the reasons is because every time she connected with someone in one way or another, there were concerns of how would they fit into her life as a semi-royal. Although she was no longer in the fold, she was still considered Diana, Princess of Wales. And she had a life patterned after that, as well as her humanitarian work. She was co parenting with a royal prince and, of course, his mother, the queen. And, of course, there were always people, tabloids, the public, etc., hounding her. And many men found this to be a turnoff. Diana found her time extremely lonely, having a few sparks here or there, but never quite connecting with anyone, especially if they didn't connect with her children. Having friends and comrades globally, but having yet to feel loved genuinely, Diana was deeply lonely. Meanwhile, Prince Charles declared he would host Camilla's 50th birthday at Highgrove. And in order to make herself scarce, Princess Diana accepted an invitation from longtime family friend Muhammad Al Fayed to join him and his wife on holiday. Diana went and was absolutely happy and carefree. This is when she became reacquainted with Dodi Fayed, Muhammad Al Fayed's son. Their chemistry was encapsulating, and the holiday was later described as the best holiday she had ever had. Although Dodi Al Fayed's ex girlfriend, or perhaps fiance, depending on who you ask, claims that Dodi cheated on her with Princess Diana, their romance was unruffled with any such claims, and there were a few about Dodi. Either way, they were deeply in love, and they spent weeks entranced in this moment, in what some would call the happiest period of Princess Diana's life. However, that would come to an end.
Enjoying her second holiday alone with Dodi Fayed, cruising off the coast of Sardinia on his father's yacht, Johnny Carl. They planned to round off their holiday with a night in Paris before Diana flew back to Britain to see her boys. While the trailing paparazzi had been a nuisance, arguing openly with the yacht's crew, the couple's departure for Paris was anticipated.
While in Paris, it has been alleged that Dodi Al Fayed was preparing to propose to Princess Diana. And while we can never know for sure, it's just even more sad when you think of it. She had finally found a love that felt real, that she was enjoying, and she was able to be herself and be more carefree. But we would never see that come to fruition.
That this lonely, vulnerable, and rudderless vessel had at last found a comforting anchor in life, a safe harbor to run to, from the perils of the deep. For a few short days, she enjoyed that state of grace in a stormy existence. Then the heavens cracked open and claimed her.
After a pursuit from aggressive paparazzi in Paris, and allegedly a drunk driver, Princess Diana passed away after a car crash in a tunnel in Paris. This has been disputed in so many different ways. There have been multiple investigations. There have been multiple conspiracy theories, allegations, claims, finger pointing. All I will say, especially considering I'm being hosted on a platform, is that I cannot say one way or the other what is true and what is not. But the only thing that is true is that a life was taken, 2 lives were taken, in a tragic accident that should have never happened. After Princess Diana passed away, the people observed the royals as uncaring and reclusive versus leading the nation in mourning like they should have been. The royals opted for, at first, not to fly the Union Jack at half-mast because Princess Diana wasn't considered a royal. The first Sunday service following news of Princess Diana's death, mind you, this news has been made public, made no mention of Princess Diana. and was also lighthearted and comedic in tone, which many felt was extremely distasteful, which was made even more egregious when highlighted by the fact that William and Harry were actually in attendance. Police refused bouquets at first to be laid at any of the royal estates, following protocol. Many asked, "Where's the Queen when we need her?" The Earl Spencer read every one for filth and honored his sister with love and passion. I always wondered, did he feel any kind of guilt for not allowing her to move to Althorpe because of the increased surveillance that it would bring? But I guess we'll never know, but that has to be tough. At the end of the day, the only people who were to blame are the people who were involved, which is the paparazzi and anyone else who might have been involved that I'm not aware of. The Queen heard the cries of her people and finally addressed the nation publicly by saying goodbye to Princess Diana on the eve of her service. Her sentiments were then reinforced again when Queen Elizabeth II bowed to Princess Diana's casket as it passed by during the procession. Following Princess Diana's death, Prince Charles thought it best not to abruptly bring Camilla out as his partner at this time. He thought it would not only get him backlash, but he thought it would be insensitive to his sons. One can only hope that he maintained that same level of concern for his sons, which we now know that he did not. However, even though everyone else was considering how William and Harry would take this, how the public would process this, Camilla had her eyes set on the throne. Charles moves on, and he used William to do it.
The royal family's focus, however, was not on the dead, but on the living, particularly Camilla Parker Bowles, the third wheel in the royal marriage. Prince Charles, who considered her presence in his future as non-negotiable, instructed his advisers to introduce his partner to the public in a way that was unobtrusive and discreet. The prince's new press spokesman, Mark Bolland, devised ways to achieve his master's bidding. He used a meeting at St. James's Palace between Prince William, seen as the living legacy of the late princess, and Camilla to signal her acceptance by Diana's children. Royal correspondents were briefed on the meeting, Bolland helpfully adding that Camilla needed a cigarette and a stiff gin and tonic after the fateful encounter. When William eventually realized that he had been played like a fish in order to enhance Camilla's standing, he was understandably furious that a very private and intimate family moment had been used in such a manner.
A letter is published later alleging that it was penned by Diana, and it was stating her fears that Prince Charles would plan a car accident for her to die in. As his wife, albeit they were divorced, as his wife, he would not be allowed to remarry as long as she was living. And while some have found this to be a grim coincidence, many others, like myself, don't believe in coincidences.
Topping off the lurid stories was a letter purportedly written by Diana in October 1996 or 1995, where she wrote about her suspicions that there was a plot organized by her ex-husband to have her killed by engineering a car accident. Inevitably, the prince became the subject of headlines such as, "Charles, how much more can I take?"
Andrew Morton dismisses any claims or allegations that the royal family was involved in Diana's death in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, the letter was not verified in any way. Diana had soon passed on. And although accusations flew, as someone who published a body of work, he definitely avoided defaming anyone or accusing anyone of a crime, which anyone with a platform should do. All investigations, and there were multiple, turned up no evidence of Princess Diana and Dodi Al Fayed's deaths being anything other than an accident, despite Dodi's father, Muhammad Al Fayed, spending over $5 million bringing up new investigations trying to get to the bottom of his son's death. Andrew Morton somewhat bashes conspiracy theories and dismisses all claims that Diana's death was anything but an accident. But there have been so many people that have come out and said that her driver was not drunk. Do with that what you will. I mean, you have the freedom to discuss anything. Obviously, I would just encourage anyone who is looking into this to please not defame anyone or make any accusations that you cannot prove. Either way, 2 lives were lost. And regardless of the cause, it's just a tragedy. So many people lost people that they loved. Dodi Al Fayed deserved to live a full life. He was very young as well. He had a full life ahead of him. He had so many opportunities, ambitions, goals, passions, and he was with the woman that he loved. And to see that coming crashing down, that's heartbreaking. Princess Diana, however, we just followed her entire life. And so, with preparation, obviously knowing that she is no longer with us and knowing that this point of the book would come eventually, it is still very, very sad to cover it. Because you think of all the things that she could have done. You think of all the things that she wanted to do and all the ambitions that she had and how her life was beginning to take shape in the way that she wanted it. And for the first time in her life, she was able to mold the experience that she wanted. And she finally had the power and the resources to do so. And so for her to only get to live in that existence for a very short while, it's just such a shame to me. Moreover than that, though, the legacy that she's left behind will outlive everyone in her lineage. She made a mark. And when she made the statement, someone's got to go out there and love on people and love on everyone, she meant that. And that's why she's been deemed Queen of Hearts. The royal family over the years have done a few things that, in my opinion, have served to undermine her legacy. A year after her death, tabloids in some way mocked the fact that there weren't as many flowers outside of the royal estates, saying that the Diana hysteria has passed, as if she weren't a real person who touched lives. When you think of the UK tabloids, I want you to think of that. They don't have souls. And even when someone has died, they still dishonor her legacy. And here we are, many, many years later, and they're doing the same thing to her son. It's tragic. But one of the things that Princess Diana managed to do was leave behind a legacy for her son to walk. He used her legacy as a blueprint to dig himself out of what could have been an otherwise life-ending experience. When we say on this channel, we're very proud of Harry, I think most of us understand how long these steps have been in the making. And it was long before he even realized what his journey was. And as someone who has the freedom now to choose his life and how he lives it, I find it to be so poetic that he is living a life of service in the same way that his mom never got a chance to. Someone said that while the royal family can try and erase Princess Diana's legacy, they can never erase her impact on people. And I want to leave you with this quote. But before I do, I want to say thank you so much for listening. This is the last installment of our 3-part recap of Diana, her true story in her own words. But we will be recapping another body of work next week. We won't split it up into parts. Next week's royal review will be centered around Diana, but it will be something a lot more fun and upbeat. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please don't forget to go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Hit the join button if you want to become a member, and thank you so much for supporting the channel. Don't forget to leave your chats in the comment section or in the live stream or in the live chat. Now, before I go, I want to play one last clip for you, and I hope you have a great night.
As the commentator Polly Toynbee wrote, Diana the Difficult was a problem the palace could tackle, but Saint Diana is something the palace can never contend with. If someday the monarchy finally draws peacefully to a close, Diana's ghostly spirit will have played its part.